Tallaght has had a long and eventful history, full of colourful and intriguing characters. It's even had its fair share of storytellers and writers who've drawn on this vibrant location as inspiration for their fiction and folklore. These stories and accounts combine in a rich tapestry that illuminate Tallaght as the place we know today. A long, long time ago, before Ireland was inhabited, harsh geological forces and glaciers shaped the limestone plains and granite hills of the Dublin Wicklow Mountains, an inspirational setting for many of Tallagh's greatest stories. Fionn McCool, perhaps the greatest Irish legend of them all, and his Fianna warriors had many adventures in these mountains. In particular, Fionn and the Fianna regularly frequented the beautiful valley Glenasmole. There they would have camped, and under the night stars looked down upon the site that is now Tallaght. The name Glenasmole is derived from the Irish Down the Smoil, or the Valley of the Thrushes. But Tallagh's legacy is not only infused by Irish legends. One of the earliest invaders of Ireland was the Greek prince Partholon. In 2379 BC, it is told that a plague killed 9,000 of his army and followers. Partholon buried his dead here in Tallaght and its environs. As a result, the place came to be named Tallaght Muintere Partholon, or the plague grave of Partholon's people. It is from this that the name Tallaght is derived. The Annals of the Four Masters, written between 1632 and 1636, recount Partholon's story. However, despite this record, no physical evidence of a mass burial ground has ever been found here. Tallaght has other dark, more frightening stories. In 1725, a large cairn stood on Mount Pelier Hill, overlooking the village and its inhabitants. In that year, Speaker Connolly built a hunting lodge which became known as the Hellfire Club on that very spot. The roof was originally slated, but was constantly stripped bare by the unforgiving wind. Locals believed that the devil, angered at the destruction of the cairn, would not allow the roof to remain on the building. The lodge subsequently became the meeting place of the Hellfire Club, and many frightening tales of devil worship, demonic appearances and ghostly hauntings still surround this eerie building. But Tallaght wasn't an unholy place. Far from it. Early religious settlers made it a centre of spiritual learning. In fact, Tallaght made its religious historical debut with the foundation of a monastery here by St Maelruin in the last quarter of the 8th century. Through the influence of St Maelruin and his friend St Angus, the monastery of Tallaght became a centre of learning and piety. It is also associated with the Cayley Day spiritual movement that subsequently spread throughout Ireland. The monastery of Tallaght became such an important institution that it and the monastery at Finglas were known as the Two Eyes of Ireland. Many important religious documents, such as the Martyrology of Tallaght, a calendar of saints known as the Féilire of Angus, and the Stowe Missal, are associated with here. St Maelruin's church, graveyard and tower are built on the site of the original monastery. The grave of George Otto Sims, former Primate of All Ireland, an expert on the Book of Kells, is here. The final resting places of renowned artists Oisin Kelly, Elizabeth Rivers and Evie Hone can also be found here. In 1855, the Dominican order founded the Priory of St Mary on the site of the medieval castle of Tallaght. The Dominican order purchased the lands and buildings in 1855. The monks lived in the adjoining Tallaght House and said Mass in a converted farm building attached to the Tower House. In 1864, they opened the present Priory building, adding extensions in 1901 and 1957. The oldest part of St Mary's Priory was built in 1864. The scholastic settlement of St Maelruin and St Angus and the development of St Mary's Dominican Priory means that there has been a strong tradition of learning in this area. Today, the Institute of Technology Tallaght, Dublin, a centre of excellence in education, is located close to the site of the monastery of Tallaght. Aside from being rich in history and legend, Tallaght has also been home to a litany of writers and artists. The first ever war correspondent, William Howard Russell, a reporter for the London Times, was born at Lilyvale, Whitestown, Tallaght on the 28th of March 1821. He wrote first-hand, describing battles such as the charge of the Light Brigade, and is famous for coining the phrase, the thin red line. His writings about the horror of the Crimean War inspired Florence Nightingale to begin her mission to the Crimea. Of course, if William Howard Russell had been in Tallaght in 1867, he could have witnessed a local battle first-hand, the Battle of Tallaght. The encounter is commemorated by a plaque at the top of the wall between the Dragon Inn and the Dominican Priory. Not all Tallagh's literary offspring went off to war. A more gentle creativity is associated with one of Tallagh's most renowned families, the Tynans, particularly with Katherine Tynan and Nora Tynan O'Mahony, who lived at the family home Whitehall near the Bellegarde Road. The Tynans were dairy farmers, and Katherine was one of 12 children. From an early age, she showed a talent for literature. She devoted most of her time to writing and generated a prolific output including 18 collections of poetry, 5 plays and 105 popular novels. She had many literary friends who used to visit the family home, including George A.E. Russell and W.B. Yeats. A.E. described her as the greatest singer in that awakening of our imagination which has been spoken about as the Irish Renaissance, and Whitehall ranks as one of the centres of the Irish literary revival. One of Katherine Tynan's most famous poems is Sheep and Lambs. All in the April evening, April airs were abroad. The sheep with their little lambs passed me by on the road. The sheep with their little lambs passed me by on the road. All in the April evening, I thought of the Lamb of God. The lambs were weary and crying, with a weak human cry. I thought of the Lamb of God, going meekly to die. Up in the blue, blue mountains, dewy pastures are sweet. Rest for the little bodies, rest for the little feet. But for the Lamb of God, up on the hilltop green, only a cross of shame, 2 stark crosses between. All in the April evening, April airs were abroad. I saw the sheep with their lambs and thought on the Lamb of God. The Local Studies collection of the library holds a special collection of Katherine Tynan's work where you can read more of her work. Much of Tallagh's stories and histories were simply shared anecdotally from a storyteller to his listeners. One such person was Malachy Horn, a local farmer. He was born on a farm on Killinarden Hill in the year of the famine 1847. He spent almost a century working his mountain holding and would have known nearly all local events and happenings. He related a vast store of these valuable memories, folklore and anecdotes to his friend Dr. George A. Little, who recorded them for posterity in his book Malachy Horn Remembers. Of course, Tallagh's stories aren't all folklore and legend. Modern technological advances have left indelible marks on Tallagh's history and infrastructure. The present-day Lewis terminus is located on the line of the old Blessington Road, along which ran the Dublin to Blessington steam tramway, the lifeblood of a developing Tallaght and its citizens. Beginning operations on the 1st of August 1887, the steam tramway connected Blessington to Dublin City via Terenure. As well as carrying passengers, the tram served the important cattle and sheep fairs of Blessington and the De Selby quarries at Jobstown. Before this, the nearest train or tram transport was from Clondalkin, nearly 5 kilometres away. The steam tram was extended to Paulafuca in 1895 and finally ceased operations on the 31st of December 1932. The 20th century has seen the biggest changes taking place in Tallaght, particularly following the announcement by Dublin County Council planners in the 1960s that a new town would be built around Tallaght village. This decision started the process that has turned Tallaght from a small country village into the thriving place we know today, with the community infrastructure of the Square Shopping Centre, the hospital, the Lewis, the Civic Theatre, IT Tallaght, and of course this library. Since the early 1970s, Tallaght has developed from a small village into a large suburban area with a population of about 100,000 people. A rapidly changing and dynamic area, that means that there are 100,000 real-life stories being lived in this dynamic town and its historic surroundings each day. So why not take a break from the bustle of daily life to learn about the many stories that surround you?